moderator today will be Aditi Hardikar. Aditi is a former administration appointee and presidential campaign staffer with experience working across diverse communities. Please join me in welcoming our panelists and our moderator.
Thank you so much, Nisha, and good morning to everyone. It is so great to virtually be with all of you, talking about the importance of API women getting involved in our government and in politics. So it is with great privilege that I want to introduce our panel, where we are talking about the candidate and three fantastic and distinguished candidates at that. Our three panelists this morning are one, Stephanie Chang, who is currently the state senator in Michigan. She is the first Asian American woman to be elected to the Michigan legislature and has worked as a community organizer in Detroit for nearly a decade before serving 2 terms in the Michigan House of Representatives, and has a whole host of organizing and leadership experience in the state of Michigan. Next up, we have State Senator Tina Maharath, who is a state senator in Ohio. She's serving her first term in the Ohio Senate after being elected to the General Assembly in November 2018. She represents the 3rd Senate District, which encompasses areas of Franklin County, including Whitehall, Westerville, New Albany, Groveport, and others, including parts of Columbus. She is also the first Asian American woman elected to her position to the Ohio Senate. And is a native of Whitehall, and is also the daughter of refugee parents from the Southeast Asian nation of Laos. Finally, we have Maria Robinson, who is the state representative from Massachusetts. She is the first Korean American elected to the General Court of Massachusetts. Previously, she led the Advanced Energy Economies Program on wholesale markets, including engagement at FERC and the regional transmission organizations. Prior to that, she focused on regulatory issues relating to energy and air, including leading the organization's State Clean Power Plan campaign. So please join me in welcoming our 3 panelists.
Hello, our video supposed to be on or off?
I think on, let's do
it. Great.
Good morning, it's so great to see all of you, and thank you again.
Good morning. I see Stephanie's struggling with her daughter as well, so my kid is actually in the background, trying not to cut my face either.
Kids are honorary panelists this morning on this Zoom, so they have every right to be on the screen, so no worries. Well, again, thank you so much, and I will kick us off with our first question. Senator Chang and Senator Maharath, each of you is the first API woman ever elected to your current office. And Representative Robinson, you are the first Korean American woman elected to your office. My question is, what drove you to break this barrier, whether intentional or not? And why is it important for diverse communities to continue to break these barriers? Maybe let's start with you, Senator Chang.
Sounds good. Thank you so much to APAICS for inviting me to be part of this exciting summit. And it's very cool to see that there are so many states represented, and also just really exciting to be a part of this panel with 2 other firsts. And you know, I am someone who, as was mentioned, had been working as a community organizer before running for office, and you know, as the first Asian American woman, there wasn't anyone before me in Michigan really to look to as a model. But I think that it wasn't an intentional, you know, running to be the first Asian American woman, but it was really seeing the opportunity to make change, and especially to be able to take my organizing experience and skills to on various social justice and civil rights issues to try to take things to the next level and make a bigger impact. And it really did take quite a bit of encouragement from actually my predecessor in the State House was Rashida Tlaib, who's now a Congresswoman, and a number of friends just really helped me to be able to see that I could utilize a lot of the skills that I already had and experiences to and the passion and drive to be able to work on issues that I was actually already working on, but try to make a bigger impact. So, and you know, I think I just always will remember, even on my first campaign and my reelection in the Senate campaign, just to see that there were always, Asian American women who volunteered, and it was their first time ever helping on a campaign. So I always will recognize how important that responsibility is, of that. Obviously I represent my district, Detroit and Downriver, which honestly, actually the Asian American population is very small in my district, but I know, having been very engaged in the Asian American community in Michigan, doing, voter registration and advocacy around immigration reform and voting rights, I very much see it as part of my responsibility to also be a voice for the Asian American community, and also to bring people along with me. So whether it's having Asian American interns and now staff in my office, but also really on the campaign trail, to be able to show other young Asian American women how a campaign works, and to get them involved, and be able to provide leadership opportunities is so important. And that doesn't happen unless you have Asian American women candidates, right? So I think that is just so important, and it's a big piece of why having representation is key. Obviously, one of the other reasons is I think greater representation of all communities, but including the Asian American community, and particularly women, is really important, because it means that we can help shape better policy. When you bring your experience, mine as a daughter of Taiwanese American immigrants, and as a mom of, kids who are half Asian American, is to really always be looking at things from a social equity lens, and to always be thinking about what is the impact of certain policy going to be on our families and on young girls, and who better to have that kind of perspective than women like us. So so just very grateful to be here, and hoping that we'll see many of the 200 plus on here run for office in the future.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Senator. Senator Maharath, let's go to you next.
Yeah, so I too had a similar background as Stephanie's, or Senator, because I too heavily participated in my community. I was heavily involved not only with the Asian community, but my community as a whole, because just like Senator Chang, my district isn't all Asian American, there's actually 80% Caucasian. So I was just so tired of our local government not having the proper representation, though, because being Asian American, I grew up being a child of refugees, so oftentimes I would witness cultural barriers, language barriers, and I would also notice things such as gender pay gap between my parents, and it seemed like I was the minority in minority. So until the major minority got their voices heard, we weren't going to get our voices heard. So I thought it was about time for that change, and that's when I did notice that we've never really had a proper Asian American representation at our state house. It's always been a man, or it's always been someone who came from privilege. It was never someone who came in as a refugee or child of refugees. They came in as immigrants, which is still, some of them came in with poverty, but some of them didn't. And I needed someone up there who came into the world where we live in realities of our district, which is in poverty. So I decided to run for office by doing a couple of trainings such as APAICS, and I also did the New Americans Leader Training. And it was after the New Americans Leader Training where I decided to finally run for office, because I got to meet people, Senator Chang, and I got to meet representatives who went through all this already, who had the same fears I had, which was, oh my God, there's a lot of Americans in this district, like they're going to be so racist, or oh my God, there's a lot of privileged people in this district, like they're going to say I'm too young, or I'm too poor, or whatever the excuse would be. Like that was screwed in my head, like something that I had inscripted in my mind. So after I felt like it was a sense of normalcy, because it was just a part of the job, I decided to go ahead and run for office. And unfortunately, I had a similar story, just like Congresswoman Judy Chu. My party didn't want me. I got primaried by a write-in, because that's how much my party didn't want me. I went through smears. I went through like $1 million worth of smear ads, but at the end of the day, the people chose me because I am one of them. I'm just not the good old boy network that we all talk about. But it was definitely intentional to run for office, just not intentional to go through the experience I went through.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And unfortunately, it seems like the experience that you had, the experience that Congresswoman Chu had is unfortunately not a rarity, and it's all too common. Representative Robinson, would love for you to share a little bit about this question as well.
Thanks so much, and thanks for having me this morning. We're in our last week of session here, actually the last 2 days, so it's a little bit wild, but this is really important for me to be at. So I'm a Korean American adoptee. I'm originally from northeastern Pennsylvania, which is really, 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 really white. And so, you know, I grew up with a lot of the basic privileges because there were so few people of color that you could kind of just live your life not acknowledging race at all. And when I ran for office, I really had assumed that I was not going to be the first. I didn't do a ton of homework, and I just assumed, oh, there's no way that I'm the first. And it was just shocking to me in a place that is as, you know, supposedly with it as Massachusetts, that we'd have the first Korean American, and I'm only one of 3 women, Asian American women, to ever be elected to the state house in Massachusetts. So we're not significantly further along just because we happen to be a little bit more to the left necessarily. And so this concept of, you know, ensuring that we're providing true role models for other people is so important. And I was a little nervous at first because I come from the adoptee community, you know, whether people would be accepting of me either in the Asian caucus or in the Korean American political universe, but everyone's been really great about that and welcoming through my first term here. But that also brings in, you know, all of these same issues. Language access issues is one of the things that I've really taken up over my first term. I represent an area that's really heavily Brazilian American, and they speak Portuguese, not Spanish, and everyone will bring them information in Spanish that they cannot read and assume that they can. And so I find it, you know, really frustrating, and I know that the Chinese American community feels very similarly here, that they just don't have the kind of information that they need. We found this during unemployment this past couple of months, years, whatever you want to call it now, that our unemployment system only offered English and Spanish for their applications. And so anyone who did not speak either of those 2 languages, we had to get so many different outside groups and nonprofits to help just fill those out. And that's not how government is supposed to work. It's supposed to be working for the people and being able to give them that kind of access. I'm one of 6 Asian American members of the Asian caucus in Massachusetts, none of whom are South Asian. We're all East Asian. And to me, that's also something that I really want to help usher in the change of, is we need a larger representation. That our caucus is far from complete because we need greater representation as well. So I'm really committed to helping ensure that we add more folks to our caucus and grow it.
Thank you for sharing that, Representative. So each one of you is a state lawmaker, and Senator Chang, you started to hint at this a bit, but why is it so important for women of color to get involved specifically in state and local politics, specifically API women getting involved? And how do you feel that your background and your identity shape your ability to represent your constituents and champion progressive legislative priorities? Let's go back to you, Representative Robinson.
Sure, I think recognizing just being the minority in the room is one of those things that is so important, and someone who's often overlooked in the room, who's often mistaken for the sole other Asian woman in the room, which is a real fun experience at this point. So being able to bring that particular perspective into lawmaking and say, you know, having to stand on a desk and scream and shout and say, listen to me, which is basically what I feel like I have to do basically every single day, just to be heard, let alone taken seriously, and ensuring that, you know, recognizing that that's also representing progressive groups like right now we're having a big fight over driver's licenses for undocumented immigrants, and people have been outside our state house for weeks doing a strike there, and they're screaming at the top of their lungs and people aren't listening to them, and it's so deeply, deeply frustrating. I think our background provides a specific sort of empathy for people whose voices aren't heard, and that's an important perspective that needs to happen, and that we can view the world through a number of different lenses because we've had to code shift ourselves so much over the course of time.
Thank you for that. Senator Chang, let's go to you next.
Thanks. Really great question. I mean, I feel like there's no better example than right now in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic about why it's important to have Asian American representation and representation of other communities of color as well. I think that, you know, I think about the response to the anti-Asian rhetoric that obviously lots of community organizations and community leaders have been very instrumental in speaking out. But again, I think that it's important to have elected officials also speaking out, both Asian American and non-Asian American. But so in the Michigan State House, there is Representative Padma Kupa, who I know will be on a panel later on today, and myself. And I honestly think to myself sometimes if we weren't there, who would be, you know, issuing a press statement the week before even the first COVID case was identified in Michigan about how we need to be vigilant about, you know, not, you know, spreading anti-Asian rhetoric and hate. And at that point, there was already incidents that had happened across the country, and who would have been, you know, working together with our Attorney General Dana Nessel to put together a town hall around what's a hate crime and making sure that our Asian American community members know who to call to report discrimination and hate crimes. So, you know, maybe there would have been someone who was able to do that work, and maybe our community organizations who we rely on very much to partner with us would have been able to do all that. But I think that having Asian American elected officials at a state level has been really, I think, important to be able to do these things, convene people, speak out, and make sure that our voices are heard on that. And I think, you know, it's just so critical. But I also think of, you know, lifting up language access, which others have mentioned as well, looking at immigrants' rights issues, and also, of course, coalescing with other communities of color and their caucuses is so important, especially right now. I feel that, you know, we are at such an important time in our country right now where we're really, I think, in a reckoning around a lot of racial justice issues, and to have Asian American women at the table is key so that we make sure that our community's voices and stories and experiences are lifted up through that entire dialogue. So, you know, even just thinking about various aspects of the COVID pandemic, you know, whether we've got so many people on the front lines as healthcare professionals, we've got researchers who are developing the vaccine, and we've got so many people who in our communities that have important perspectives to share, and to have Asian American women in elective office to help lift up those stories. I think it's just so important right now.
Couldn't agree with you more. Thank you for sharing that. Senator Maharath, what are your thoughts on the question?
Yeah, so not only do I agree with the other panelists, but I also wanted to add, in addition to that, that we're bringing new perspectives to these Asian policies. Historically speaking, the nation, let alone the state of Ohio, had these policies to have the Caucasian males succeed in our state and in our country. So finally, we're bringing a new perspective to it. But at the same time, I really agreed with Representative Robinson when she said it feels like we're standing on top of the table and screaming for some change, screaming for voices to be heard. Because over in Ohio, I don't have an Asian American caucus. I don't even have a Latino with me. I just have me, and I joined the Ohio Legislative Black Caucus to go along with their voices. But they're the super minority, and they still can't get their voices heard. So it's as if I'm just a little microphone on top of the other microphone. So it definitely shapes how I make these policies, because I have policies not only geared towards Asian Americans, such as having screenings for diabetes at 23 BMI, because that's just something that us Asian Americans go through, but also have these policies for pregnant women to be able to have extra accommodation, because with us being people of color, we're more prone to things such as gestational diabetes because of the systematic racism that happens with our healthcare system. So definitely my ethnic identity definitely shapes how I make policies, but it also helps bring a different voice to the minorities' voices that's already non-existent here in Ohio State House.
Thank you for that. And that's perhaps a good segue into my next question, which is, you know, we've heard each one of you talk about the importance of intersectionality, whether it's, you know, partnering with fellow API colleagues, or if you don't have fellow API colleagues, figuring out ways to partner across other communities. And as we think about racial justice in this country, as we specifically think about the movement for Black lives, we're continuing to demand and seek justice, racial equity across the country. How do you see your role in dismantling racism, and how can API communities be better allies to those in the Black community? And how do you see that showing up in local politics in your state? Senator Maharath, since you're on my screen, would be great for you to answer if you could.
Yes, thank you for that great question. So not only are we supposed to be allies for those who are going through the Black Lives Matter movement, but also we get to also bring a different perspective as to why Black Lives Matter. Because some of the Asian Americans here in Ohio would argue that all lives matter, but all lives can't matter until Black Lives Matter. So we bring a different voice into the tone for the state, and of course for our districts, because we have to let them see why is this important for our district, let alone our country.
That's a great answer. Representative Robinson, what about you?
Sure. So this is one of those situations where, well, we're constantly trying to dismantle the model minority myth. It's also trying to use that to an advantage in this particular situation, where I feel like the Asian American community in some ways can be a bridge between the Black community and the non-Black community, at least for where I am, where they're talking to a person of color, but it is a different kind of person of color. And for better or for worse, sometimes when we are the communicators and we are the messengers of that message, some people are more willing to open their ears up about it. I'm not saying that that's a good thing or a right thing, but I'm saying that that is often the reality that I find. And for me, because of the unique relationship that the adoptee community has with the Caucasian community, I see a lot of my fellow CADs in particular really stepping up, like have these tough conversations with their community members and saying, look, you know, this could be happening to any one of us, and you've accepted us as part of your community. Why would you not have that same sort of compassion towards Black men and women? And so I think that gives us an opportunity to both partner with our POC peers, but then also build that bridge to be able to help the Caucasian communities, especially the ones that we represent, really wrap their heads around this, especially those who don't have a really large Black community. Mine is fairly small as well, that they tend to just lump people of color together also. And so it's, you know, it's a responsibility, I think, for the AAPI community to take that on and to have those tough conversations.
Thank you for that. Senator Chang.
Really important question. And I have a kind of a unique experience of being an Asian American woman representing a district that, at least in the House, it was actually predominantly African American. Now the larger Senate district is about half, because I've got a lot of Detroit, and so it's predominantly Black, and then downriver, which is predominantly white. And then I also have a Black and Asian family, and I'm raising daughters who are Black and Asian. And so I think a lot of these questions are just important for me to constantly be thinking about. And, you know, I have a friend, Tawana Petty, she's an author, she's an activist in Detroit. She put together, I'll have to try to find it and post it, a graphic that shows sort of the steps between becoming an ally all the way to, or either, I can't remember what the first step was, but it was not yet an ally, to an ally, to then also becoming a co-conspirator, is what she calls it, and which I love. I love that term. And I think it's, you know, requires a lot of self-reflection to figure out what is the best way to, you know, be either a supporting role, if that's what's best for you, or to be working hand in hand with people to come up with what the solutions are. And so for right now, you know, I mean, from day one in office and before, I'd always been working on social justice issues and issues that affected my predominantly Black, you know, district. But I, you know, especially now, have made it very intentionally, you know, the way that I try to work with Black-led organizations in Detroit to actually come up with what are the things that you see as the changes that need to happen when it comes to police. So actually a lot of the legislation that we are working on right now in my office related to police accountability comes directly from what I've heard from Black community organizations in Detroit, where we've had a couple of just sort of intimate Zoom conversations, if that is like a thing. I don't know. It's sort of
It is
weird,
now.
but yes, it is now. And that input, that feedback has been so critical, and also for people to be able to check me when I am not going far enough, or when I am not getting, you know, the details right. But to be able to be that co-conspirator where I'm working directly with Black-led organizations and also my Black colleagues in the legislature who are rightfully leading and the, you know, being the most vocal leaders on these issues, and retweeting and sharing and, you know, trying to lift them up too. So, you know, but we're all, and also I think it's important for us to all recognize we're always learning and can constantly do better. And I'm always looking for ways to get better too.
Thank you for that. And thank you to all three of you for those really thoughtful and insightful answers. I know that I've definitely learned more about how to be a co-conspirator, and I'm sure our viewers are also thinking about things in a different way as well. Specifically to Senator Chang and Senator Maharath, we of course have a very important election this year in November. Each of you is from a very important Midwestern state, Michigan and Ohio. And I know a big theme within the API community is how to increase voter turnout, how to get APIs, understanding we're not a monolith, but how to get APIs to turn out to vote. How did the two of you think about APIs in your state, and how do you think, if at all, APIs and their voter engagement and participation in the election could help either shape the outcome of the election or help to move things forward within your state? Maybe let's go to Senator Chang again.
Okay, thanks. I think that the Asian American community could play a huge role in across the country, but definitely in Michigan. You know, we're the fastest growing population in the state, and there's a lot of organizations on the ground. Well, not a lot. There's a few organizations on the ground that are nonpartisan that are really working to get Americans registered to vote and out to vote. One of the things that is really exciting about this year, although a little bit nerve-wracking too, is that we had just passed in 2018 a ballot initiative that allows for no reason absentee voting. We have a really wonderful Secretary of State, my good friend Jocelyn Benson, who sent out in the middle of the pandemic and got some hate from our president on Twitter about it, but mailed out absentee ballot applications to every single Michigan voter on the qualified voter file. And so we're going to see, I mean, we've already, I mean, the number of absentee ballots that have been returned is more than double, I think, or around double what it normally would be at this point. And so that's actually a really great opportunity for our Asian American community, because we have voters who might not be comfortable going to the polls, or have a transportation issue, or because of the language barrier, might feel more comfortable filling it out at home and have their family members help, you know, do the research and figure out who to vote for, and in the comfort of their own home, and then be able to mail it in or drop it off, or encouraging, for anyone watching from Michigan, please drop off your ballot, because we know mail has been a little a little bit more sporadic lately. We've got a primary coming up on Tuesday, but I think for the November election, absolutely, I think the Asian American community can make a huge difference. Thinking back to 2016 when Michigan so unfortunately went the way that it did. I mean, it was a margin of around 10,000 votes at the Asian American community. We could be that winning margin for sure. So it's an exciting opportunity, and it also means that we have a great responsibility to work hand in hand with our organizations on the ground to make sure people know how to vote and what their rights are.
I appreciate that. And thank you for the positive spin coming out of 2016 and how it's an exciting opportunity rather than feeling too hard on ourselves as Michiganders. Senator Maharath, what about you? How are you thinking about APIs in your community, in your state, with respect to this election?
Well, unlike you guys over in my neighbors in the state of North, our people aren't necessarily friendly with voting, so we don't get that luxury of having things like, having people get registered to vote, or upon or getting their license, or we don't have things such as having like automatic voter registrations, or getting about all that good stuff that you guys just mentioned. We have none of that. It's like a dream to me, like, because of the fact that we're bringing primarily from GOP and we're like the super minorities too. That's more reasons why people need to get out to vote, because if you're frustrated with things like this, then that's more reasons why you have to go vote. And I think that's why our Asian American voices do matter, because if you don't think you have a voice over in the presidentials because of the electoral vote, think about a down ballot. What about your state legislature seats? Over here in Ohio, our Speaker of the House just got indicted on some bribery crimes with the FBI investigations going on. And this wasn't the first one. Our previous speaker before him is still currently in an FBI investigation. So our seats over the state legislature are being bought out from corrupt people. Do you want that? No. So if you don't want that, I need you to get out there and go vote. And that's more reason why Asian American votes do matter. But it's one of those messages right now during the pandemic that is a little tough to do, because voting by mail, you don't get that intriguing experience of having to go to a poll and having to press buttons and live the American experience. But your voices matter by that ballot by mail, because of the fact that you get to be one more vote towards a non-corrupt person or someone who has the same beliefs as you, such as getting some automatic voter registration and so on and so forth. So it's one of those discussions that does need to be had in the community, but it's just so tough to do right now with the pandemic. So this is fortunately things that our nonprofits such as APIA Vote has been working on for years over in our community. And I was fortunate enough to be one of those fellows in the last presidential cycle, but it's one of those discussions that still needs to happen regardless of which election cycle it is.
Thanks for sharing those reflections and what both challenges and opportunities present themselves over the next couple of months. It's so wonderful to have the three of you on this panel, especially for those of you who didn't have role models or see yourselves in positions like the ones that you have now. But now the viewers who are watching this panel do. It's so much easier to be what you can see. And it's wonderful to have the three of you from different backgrounds and lived experiences representing different communities. What advice do you have for API women, whether who are on this call or going to watch it later, as they consider running for office? I know that I think Emily's list has said that it takes at least 3 times for a woman to be asked before she says yes to run for office. So there's already such a there are challenges for women to see themselves as being elected officials and having that confidence to say yes and taking that leap. What advice do you all have for somebody on this call who's thinking about running for office? And let's start with you, Representative Robinson.
Sure. First of all, do it. You should definitely do it. You should definitely run for office. And then you should call me, and then you should ask me for money. Those are the 2 things first and foremost. But I think it's really important to have some women in your life in particular who are maybe not involved directly with your campaign but who you can lean on for emotional support. The amount of emotional support necessary to run a campaign is something that we don't talk about enough. We talk about the financial support, we talk about going and knocking doors, but it's hard. It's hard when people slam doors in your face. It's hard when people attack you on the internet. Those are the kinds of things that are 1,000 times worse for women, 1,000 times worse for people of color. And so, and it's exponential when you put the two things together, that people will just come out of the woodwork to be especially nasty. And so making sure that you have, put together a good crew of people who might not be there, but can be that 2 a.m. phone call for you when you are, sobbing hysterically on the floor and still have to get up the next day and go to a debate, right? Making sure that you have some folks that you can lean on for that is one of the most important things moving forward. And then they can also help you sort of parse through what is normal campaign stuff versus what is truly awful that you'll experience through this. I'm not saying that it's easy to run for office. When I say do it, but we absolutely need your voices here, because we need to build up at every level, whether it's thinking about school committee or thinking about city council or town meeting, if places outside of New England even have town meeting. And so we really need your voices to be heard. And there are so many people out there who want to help you. I think that's the thing that was most surprising and wonderful about the process for me, is there were so many people who came out of the woodwork that I never expected, who were really, really excited about me running for office, and there will be for you too.
That's great, thank you. Senator Maharath, what about you?
Yeah, so definitely agreed with Representative Robinson about having that moral support. It's tough seeing your face on the 5 o'clock news, making yourself look like you're like some sort of prisoner because of smear ads. But in addition to that too, having the power to say no if you're mentally strained, or if you're just not thinking that this would be good for your mental health, say no. You're allowed to. You don't have to be perfect. There's no such things as a perfect political candidate, let alone perfect politician. So just having that power of saying no, because especially with the majority being or a rich old white guy here in Ohio, it feels like we're always competing, always trying to be perfect. But it's reality is there's no such things as perfect. So I think that moral, emotional support is everything, especially running for office, especially when you're the first, or especially when you're the super minority. You really need that emotional support. I can't emphasize how much you really need that moral support. Money can't buy your seat. I probably raised not even $20,000, and my opponent raised $2 million, and I still won. So I think moral support is actually more beneficial to run for office than having that financial support, for sure.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. Senator Chang, how about you? What's your advice?
Yeah, I mean, I would echo Representative Robinson in just doing it. I think that, I mean, it took me 6 months to decide to run for office, and I like cried all the time. I was like, I can't, I like just so much reflection, and I can't do it. I don't have enough experience, or I don't know everything about all the issues, and I'm not a mom yet, or like, just like all these things, just so stupid, right? Like we put up these there are real barriers for sure. But we shouldn't be adding our own made up barriers from our head to add on to the real barriers. So just stop all of those things. And like, I know that it's important to think, I mean, one of the things that I do think is great about women is that we are thorough, and we like to think through all of these things. And I had this 6-month process where I talked to all these people and like shadowed Rashida, and like asked myself all these questions, like made all these lists and pros and cons and all this stuff. I mean, I should have just done it. Why did it take me 6 months to do it? Like but we question ourselves, we doubt ourselves. And the thing is, people wouldn't be encouraging you to run if they didn't believe in you and they didn't see your leadership skills and the passion and the things that you're already doing in your community. And so I think that we sometimes don't even recognize the leadership that we've already shown. unless someone else points it out to us, especially as Asian American women. I mean, we women overall, but especially Asian American women. So recognize that you are already probably very involved and making a difference in your community, and running for office is, if it's what you want to do, just do it. Also, since the Barbie doll set came out yesterday, can't believe it hasn't been brought up yet, but like, I just wanted to call out, I think that we are all claiming the campaign manager, right? She looks like she's Hapa. I don't know if we've gotten any confirmation from Barbie yet, but I totally agree with you can't be what you can't see, and hopefully from hearing from us and other Asian American women throughout the day, you'll see that yes, you can do this. We support you, and you already have what it takes.
Well, I think that's an excellent place to wrap up. I just want to say thank you so much to all three of you, Senator Maharath, Representative Robinson, Senator Chang. The work that you're doing is so incredibly important, and I'm sure, although it feels like a thankless job and there are so many just naysayers, you all have already blazed the trail, and you continue to do so. And I know that personally, I feel very inspired by each one of you, and I know that everyone watching this feels the same way. So thank you for what you're doing. Stay safe. Hope your families continue to be well. And thanks for representing our communities. We really appreciate it.